Welcome to season 4 of Be Your Soul. I'm your host, Sky Bradshaw, and today we're exploring a powerful perspective that invites us to look both backwards and forwards while staying rooted in the present moment. The idea that the way we live today becomes the legacy of tomorrow. This episode, Legacy in Motion, Being a Good Ancestor Now, invites us to consider what it truly means to live with future generations in mind. When we think about ancestors, we often look to those who came before us for guidance and wisdom. But there's another truth within that reflection. We're also the ancestors of the future. Today, I'm joined by Elder Reggie, a cultural bearer and community leader whose work centers on honoring ancestral wisdom while strengthening community in the present. Together, we'll explore what it means to be a good ancestor right now and how the choices we make today shape the legacy we leave behind. But before we dive into the Unclouded Heart segment for spiritual messages of wisdom, let's invite ourselves to become present in this moment within our body, mind, and energy. Take a moment to invite yourself to take some deep and cleansing breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth, and in through your nose and out through your mouth. And as you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, invite your mind, body, and energy to relax, 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 relax. And as we move into this space of complete relaxation, we open up our energies to the ancestors, loved ones, and friends to come together today to heal and guide us and lift us to the highest version of ourselves in the light of the universe, so we may hear what we need to hear, know what we need to know, connect how we need to connect, and be what we need to be for our highest and best good, and the highest and best good of all involved, as we open up space to give and receive. In today's Unclouded Heart reflection, I've been sitting with the idea of legacy in motion, what it means to be a good ancestor right now. Often when we speak about ancestors, we look behind us. We honor the people whose lives, choices, and courage shape the world we now walk in. We recognize the imprints they left and the legacy they created. But another truth lives inside that reflection. In this very moment, we are also shaping the history of the future. The choices we make, the values we live by, the way we treat one another, the way we show up in our communities, these things do not exist only in our present moment. They ripple outward. They become part of a larger story, a larger unfolding that reaches far beyond our immediate environment. One day, someone will look back at this very moment in time and say, these were the people who came before us. And so the question becomes, what energy are we bringing? What imprint are we leaving? What footprints are we placing in the sand for others to follow? When we are living in alignment, when we are doing our best to move with purpose, integrity, and care, we begin to understand something important. Living for our highest and best good today is not separate from the highest and best good of the future. This doesn't mean that we're perfect. Being human means we must stumble or act unskillfully along the way. What matters is that we continue to grow, that we learn through experience, that we remain humble enough to change what no longer aligns, and that we return again and again to living in alignment with our highest and best good to the best of our abilities. The saying goes, do good, be good, see good. And the broader invitation within that is to live with awareness, to recognize the moments where kindness, integrity, and care show up in our lives, and to choose to build from those moments forward. Because each of those choices become part of the path we are laying down not only for ourselves, but for those who will one day walk in our footsteps. To recognize that every act of kindness, every effort towards healing, every choice to grow strengthens the ground beneath the generations who will come after us. There's an old proverb: we stand on the shoulders of those who've walked before us with strength, honor, and respect. So the reflection becomes this: how are we making our shoulders broad and strong for the future?
The Be Your Soul Substack, created by Sky Bradshaw, is a space where the conversations from the podcast continue through thoughtful writings, spiritual insights, and soul-centered reflections. Many of the posts and offerings are freely available, so you can explore, read, and stay connected at your own pace. For those who wish to go deeper, paid subscribers receive early access to podcast episodes 2 days before release, unedited interview videos, and access to master-level classroom materials that expand on the teachings shared through the show. If the podcast supports you and you'd like to follow the ongoing reflections or help sustain the work behind it, this is a beautiful place to connect. Visit skybradshaw.substack.com to explore and subscribe.
Today, I'm joined by Elder Reggie, a respected culture bearer and community leader whose work reflects a deep commitment to honoring ancestral wisdom while strengthening community in the present. Through his involvement in cultural preservation and spiritual tradition, Elder Reggie reminds us that the legacy we inherit is also the legacy we are shaping. His perspective invites us to consider how our choices, values, and actions today become the foundation for those who will come after us. I'm grateful to have him with us on this conversation as we explore what it means to live with intention, to carry tradition forward, and to become a good ancestor right now. Thank you, Elder Reggie. I appreciate you being here so much.
I was looking forward to the show because I'm doing something for Sky, who helps us out in a tremendous way with the New Orleans Vodou organization. And just to give back what we call reciprocity is always a fun thing for me.
And thank you, Elder Reggie. I really appreciate that. That is sweet for you to say. I'm really grateful for your wisdom in the show and just to have people experience what I've experienced with you, because you've really brought a lot of wisdom and just spiritual presence into my world. So I'm grateful for you.
I'm very humble for your words, Sky, and it's a pleasure to be here. But I like to set it up this way. In New Orleans, I was raised in what's called the New Orleans Spiritual Church, founded by the great Mother Leafy Anderson, which was carried on by Mother Catherine Seal. And the premise of that church, even though it had the trappings of a Baptist or Pentecostal church, spiritualism, the same spiritualism that we find when people do seances and things of that nature. So I had a relationship with spirits coming from that foundation. So in 1987, I was in the United States Navy. I was what they call a petty officer. And we was making a deployment from Norfolk, Virginia, and we was en route to Rota, Spain. But one evening when I got off from work, I decided to sit on the outside of the ship on the starboard side. And in that day, I slipped into a meditation. And somewhere in that meditation, I had an out-of-body experience. I was with a young man around the same age I was. He was an encaptured African that was going to be brought back to the New World to be enslaved. But he decided to jump overboard. And when he jumped overboard and my ship hit that same, what we call location, this conversation between me and the person happened.
Yeah.
Over the years, since 1987 till now, I've always been trying to unpack that day and what was the purpose of it. And for me, the jewel of it all, it was an ancestor. It was a previous ancestor of mine that found me solid enough to invest its wisdom and teachings within me.
Yes.
And I was receptive to hold that energy. And Sky, I've been walking with it from that time till now. And so
Mm-hmm.
as the show move forward, I'll try to give some of the revelations from that once of a chance meeting, and as it
Mm-hmm.
continue to guide. And therefore, my whole life really been back to respecting, learning, and honoring the ancestors and what that really means for each one of us as we live life in this present moment.
Yeah. And that's really the topic of today. What I wanted to talk about is like in this moment, not only are we trying to like hold space for those ancestors who's walked before, like being having good practice, being a good, see good, do good, be good, sort of connection to those ancestors and realizing like honoring them is having good acts in this present moment, but it's also setting the tone for carrying that energetic legacy forward. So the people who walk, beyond us have that connection to be able to tap into, have that position. Because if you weren't receptive in that moment, then that ancestor wouldn't have been able to connect with you. And then the whole legacy past that of you wouldn't be into play. And all the people that you touched from
Yes.
that position. And so it's that sort of like present momentness of staying open, aware, aligned, and tuned in our center, whatever you want to call it. And then not only looking back for the wisdom of the ancestors, but looking forward and realizing like we are those ancestors right now.
And that is correct. And so this brings me to another event. And this event, it was happened in August of 2005, New Orleans. We had a hurricane called Katrina. At the
Yeah.
time, I was on the New Orleans Fire Department. That was my employment at the moment. I was an active firefighter. So when the hurricane came in and the water overtook the city, it brought a lot of hurt and a lot of unease within me, grief. So I say I have a pillar to hold on to, and that pillar is my ancestors. So I call for my ancestral strength, even though my home was lost, my family and other friends' homes were lost, but I had strength, Sky. And with that strength, I say, you know what? I'm going to find a way to make a way out of no way. My church establishment of the New Orleans Spiritual Church, it was in disarray. So I made phone calls to try to get people. Some people, well, Reggie, I'm not coming back to the city. I don't know if the church is going to be sustainable and none of things of that nature. So I kind of lost a pillar, which was the church at the time, the New Orleans Spiritual Church. And as we speak right now, that church has not come back into being. But I still function and operate from that particular pillar that I had, because New Orleans has gone through many changes, many ups and downs. But at the same time, with me being consistent in honoring the ancestors and trying to honor the legacy of that city, such as Great Mother Marie Laveau, Dr. John, and some of the other, I would say, foundational strengths and faces of New Orleans, to not let them get swept under the rug and not become an ancestor, even what we call an elevated ancestor. Because within my family is my ancestor. I have an ancestor altar with pictures, flowers, waters, of that thing. But then when I bring in the community as a whole, no matter what your ethnicity is, then I bring you in as what we call an elevated ancestor. And as an elevated ancestor, I can draw on the strengths, the teachings, and the things that I've learned from you, because all my teachers have not been in my presence. I have not just sat in classrooms, but I've seen them, the way they operate within the community. I've seen them operate on television. I've seen them operate at large. And from there, I learn, and they become an elevated ancestor.
Absolutely. Yes. And, for me, a few years ago, I was contemplating on a deep subject, and I was thinking about ancestry and, my involvement in a lot of different paths and a lot of different connections, and, the Vodou being one of them. And I was like contemplating on that, trying to make sure that like I honored respectfully my connection there. And one of the things that came forward really strongly was like, I believe in reincarnation. So like in reincarnation, like I wasn't always this shell. I wasn't this physical being,
Mhm.
the same ethnicity, the same gender, I would have been many things. And so if we think of ancestors along that line of like, all my incarnations and all of the ancestors connected to those incarnations really make a web of connection of like an infinite possibility to be able to tune into. And so like I try and think along those lines of like not only like me in this physical form and who I'm connecting to from ancestor, but also in the future, but like the possibility of how Edgar would say, my papa would say, like, it's not the rock, it's the ripple. And like that
Okay.
ripple, that
Yeah.
ripple, oh, that ancestral ripple is so intense when you honor it in a just in a self-based way, like in a way of just being the best version of yourself you can right now, create such a beautiful ripple.
Oh, yes. And I'd like to add to that ripple, but I'd like to bring in one of the little foundational pieces that I wanted to read.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain type of loneliness that dwells within each human due to a deep knowing where we came from and the relationship of our ancestors. Now, I'm going to piggyback off of that ripple that you meant. Because we are different incarnations, and as a culture barrier in the city of New Orleans, we're working with Vodou. Within Vodou, some in the Black or the African American community say, well, you might be selling out our culture, our historical background when you work with people of other ethnicities. And I always combat them and I say, well, you're looking at a person's skin or you're looking at a person's personality, but you don't know that person's incarnation. Because their previous history, they could have been an African, they could have been a Chinese, they could have been a Native American or European. We don't know this. And each physical being you see, that's not the totality of that being, because we are going through different incarnations to get this experience, what we call life. And to box it in a neat little package, we call it ancestors and ancestry. Now, modern day people do going back and doing ancestry tests. And when they look back and they follow their lineage, and they're seeing a diverse of bloodlines that's coming in to make them who they are today. And that's why we can't judge a book by its cover today. We have to go with the flow of the energy and how the ancestors are moving within that particular person.
Absolutely. And the soul base, because the soul is the core of us all. And when we work in our authentic self, our center and our soul, then that gives us the opportunity. Not all people are as in tune, though, to be able to hear the ancestors or connect with the ancestors like right away. So if you had advice for someone who wanted to start opening up, like not only their practice to be able to sense, see, feel, connect with their ancestor, but also recognize like holding the container, that's what allowed you to hear that first voice is like being in a good, steady spot within yourself. What advice would you give someone in those realms?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is sort of the way you started the show, Sky. Do a meditation, calm yourself, and allow the voices that you hear to see what message they are saying. Because in the West, we are big on prayers. Coming out of the church system, we're big on prayer, but we are not big on receiving answers to those prayers. And so when the ancestors are speaking, I would recommend everyone to take a small glass of water. Pour a libation first. If you can open up an altar, right? Do that, pour water, say a few words, then sit, meditate, and listen. See
Mm-hmm.
what your ancestors is and how they're trying to connect with you. And believe me, over a small period of time, you'll start receiving those messages and you will feel the genuineness of the ancestor because it's not spookism, it's realism. And they're
Right.
there.
That's
Mm-hmm.
true. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've always try and remind people it's like any relationship. If you were trying to have a relationship with a friend or a family member or someone, you would be attentive. You would get to know them. You would sit and listen, not just always talk. You would receive and you would give. And how we honor building relationships in the physical realm is a very good way of how we can build relationships with ancestors or, higher vibrational energies, because when we open ourselves up to listening, when we open ourselves up to carving time out of our busy day, then that allows for the space for relationship with them to build.
Yes. And I like to add, and I learned this through some of the teachings I've received over the years. In my physical form right now, I'm an ancestor because I'm a living ancestor because of my kids and my grandkids. Once I do transition from this world, they have memory and things of me to carry them forward and to tell their kids and grandkids.
Right.
And so so I'm a living ancestor that's leaving a legacy for the future that could be referenced. Because right now, when I go to my altar, I have my mother and my father. I don't have pictures, but I have writings of my grandparents. And I still can remember when I was of youth and toddler age of seeing them and some of the things they did. And that is an indelible mark now in my mind. And I refer to that. And so when they're physically gone, but I'm still here, and when I reference certain things, Grandma, remember that day? Grandma, remember how you used to pluck the chicken? Things of that nature. I am feeding her in the other realm, but I'm also feeding myself in this realm of our ancestral connection. And so the things that we're doing as parents, grandparents, amongst the living now, we are setting the trend for the future as ancestors.
It's true. And so I, in contemplating this topic when we were talking about it, I kept thinking about those things like, what impressions do people like you or other people make on me in that way? And like, what would I like to embody within myself? Like, oh, when I think of Elder Reggie, I feel like that he's just kind and listens easily. Like, oh, I want to be more like that. Like, how do I open myself up in those spaces? And so I think that that's just how we do it. We connect to the energy. We, mimic, I guess is an easy word to say it, but we embody that. We do those things. And then the legacy just moves on because energy isn't singular. Every time we come together, our energies combine, they connect. I can't walk away from a conversation with anyone without taking something from it. And so when we stay in that space of like, I'm just going to be the best version of me, not in a judgment or get it right and perfect sort of way, but more along the lines of just like, if I can be the best version of myself, then hopefully what people take away lasts longer than, than this moment. And I think that that's something, I say easy to do, but, it's happening whether we're working on it consciously or not.
Yes. And Sky, I like to bring in something. There's a teachings also, and everyone may not be receptive to it, but I still like to put it out for your general audience. And it's wrapping up two things. It's wrapping up the soul, SOUL, and the ancestors. The way I'm being taught is that your ancestors, when they want to reincarnate back into this world, the third dimension, they're coming through 4 portals. One is an altar, which we call earth. The second is through water. The third is through like air, and the fourth is fire. And so the ancestors through the soul are moving through those 4, and then they land within a living body to incarnate into this dimension. And so with that being said, when a person set up their altar, because they may not know what portal the ancestors are moving through, if they have an altar, if they set water, if they can burn a candle from time to time, and if they can burn incense, you're covering the 4 portals. And with that, you're doing your ancestors a great service plus yourself.
Yep. And say their name. say
And
their
say they,
name,
oh,
say their name, say their name. And I always end like if I have a list, then I always end
mm,
with those who are named and not named that I may know or not know. And then you got your bases covered.
yes. You have your bases covered. There's an ancestral divination that I do the way I move within the Shrine of the White Cloak. And in that, we have to tap into your ancestors to get a real snapshot of what's bothering you in this world. It could be lack of protection. It could be lack of finance. It could be lack of relationship issues. And majority of the time, we have to tap back into the ancestral realm to see what's affecting you in the present.
Yeah.
And so I'm using one of those four portals to connect with a person's ancestor, to give them some guidance to move forward in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's
That's
important to have those.
beautiful.
Yes, I do. Yeah. But before we move forward, I want to give you a big thanks and appreciation, Scott, because it's the particular marker that we put up on Esplanade Avenue in New Orleans, which marked these men and women who died in what I call America's first civil rights march. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know of any of these people. I didn't know of that event, but some way, somehow, the ancestors had quickened that information to me. And once they quickened it to me, I done the research, and then I wanted to bring it out, but I didn't have a platform to do that. And the New
Mm-hmm.
Orleans International Vodou Day organization allowed me a platform. And I am so appreciative for that, because the ancestors move in a lot of different ways, even a platform, a friendship, or
Mm-hmm.
even a dinner out, or words of exchange. Let yourself know that's your ancestors bringing it in abundance, because we are not in control of the way they move. We just got to
Right.
be receptive of the way they move.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that marker is, we got to go look at the grounds before it was
Mm.
placed. And I got to
Yeah.
research the Freedmen's
Yes.
March, and it was really expansive for me as well. So they definitely touched me in the way that, I was able to support and help and do what
Yes.
was
Yeah.
necessary.
Yes. And that's very important, because a lot of people believe, especially in the African American community, that the civil rights started in the late 50s, 60s, 70s with Martin Luther King. No, there were trailblazers before they got to that point. Because what they was doing in New Orleans at that time led to the famous Plessy versus Ferguson Separate but Equal Act. Because the
Mm-hmm.
people in New Orleans, with the spirit of voodoo behind them, was pressing the South. They was putting big pressure on the South to make change at a rapid pace. The South wasn't ready for that. But that's another story to be told on another day. But we're still thankful.
We are thankful, and they are ancestors that paved the way. And in that moment, they, they may have known it, or they may not have known it, that like what this one choice that I'm making, this one talk that I'm giving is going to live on in a legacy greater than this. They
Yeah.
probably were just trying to get something done that they knew needed to happen in the world for themselves and for their families. And it just expands and expands and expands.
Yes. And the thing that they wanted, not me, the thing that they wanted and they did receive was the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which led to the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And those martyrs that died that day had a direct impact on the Congress. When you unpack it, the Congress, the Senate, and even the president during that time frame had to give concessions to that particular event.
Mm-hmm.
And we are so ever grateful for that, because that
Absolutely.
marker is standing and it represents New Orleans International Voodoo Day. We are an organization that's moving, but we're moving and led by ancestors and led by spirit. And with that, we are doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'm grateful to be able to work on that with you.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about it,
Mhm.
because the base of it at its core really is recognizing not just like let's just talk about the processional. The processional, you do walks people through the city to now 10 points because we have the new marker, and stops and gives homage, gives connection, like tunes into that energy and highlights it. And I think one of the beauties of the event is that it's not just that day. Like, we are doing work 24/7, 365 to uphold, to uplift those ancestors, to uplift the history, to uplift that position. And in that, like, we don't know, like, in 50 years, what this work that we're doing right now, like, what is that going to do for the world? And so I think that it's really beautiful. One of the reasons why, when I was thinking of this topic, you were the first person that came to my head, because it just is that sacred connection that doesn't stop connecting. It just is on and on and on.
Yes, yes. Before I start with the 10 markers, I would like to speak on every new moon, each month. Sometimes it bleed over into another month. We come together as a community, no matter what religious persuasion you are. We come together and we hold a joint spirit event to try to connect, break the interface down, and be on one accord, because America as itself right now is going through a metamorphosis. Things are changing. There's a lot of energy, dark energy, some good energy. And so as a collective spiritual body, we're trying to attack it from different fronts. And that's something we're doing at the New Orleans International Vodou Day, that's present, ongoing on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Now, this brings me back now to the march before we do the ceremony at Congress Square. We start off at the Mississippi River, because slave ships and cargo ships and other ships always came when they were bringing things to Louisiana in particular. They came through the Mississippi River as the docking station. So we start on the river, we do a prayer, we do a libation, we give honor and praise to the ancestors, the water bodies, and the different spirits that was present at that time, and that's supporting our event. So we start there, then we move to what is called the French Market. There's a big, huge statue of Joan of Arc that France donated to the city of New Orleans, and right behind it is a placard that marks the New Orleans French Market. And at that particular market, and we pour libations there because slaves were sold there. Not just slaves, indigenous people were sold there. There was just a lot of undoing. Even though you could buy tomatoes, fruits, veggies, there was livestock. It was a marketplace, put it like that. And so we honor that. And then we moved down to the U.S. Mint at the time of the Civil War. It was the mint that helped, where they printed money to support the Civil War. But even though the mint is not part of our stoppage, I do like to point it out to people, especially visitors who are not familiar with the city of New Orleans. And so that takes us to our third marker. Now we're dealing with what is called the domestic slave trade. A lot of people don't know about this, Sky. And one of the markers deals with what's called 12 years a slave. And it's just an historical point in all the slave pens and slave yards. And so we honor that. And then across the street at Charter and Esplanade is a second marker. And it's a marker that's dealing with Solomon Northrop. Solomon Northrop, who was the face of the 12 years a slave, who lived up in the Massachusetts area, was captured. Greece brought into slavery after slavery at a certain period of time. And then we move forward to the Lalaurie House. The Lalaurie House, it's unfortunate. In New Orleans, it is marketed as a ghost house. But what happened, some slaves was beaten, brutal, and demarginalized there. And so from there, we just point out down the street, 1 block away, is the Lalaurie House and the tragedy that happened there. And we just try to honor the tragedy, not that we have anything in particular or against Lalaurie. We just honoring what happened there. And then that moves us on to our next marker, which is now the marker of the Freedmen's March and Procession. And I take pride in that, and I honor that. Then we continue down Esplanade. We move to, there's the first, which is considered the first African-American suburb and town in Louisiana. It's called the Tree Mate. Some of your audience may have heard of Tree Mate for all the historical and cultural stuff that goes down. So we honor the Tree Mate. There's a sign there. And then from the Tree Mate, we continue the procession down to St. Augustine Church. It is the second parish of African Americans in the state of America, Catholic system, church system with house. They had a orphanage and they also had a school there. But there in front of the church, we have an anchor made out of chain. And it's representing the unknown slave. For all the slaves that helped build the church, and that was also a carpentry shop and an ironworking shop. We don't know of the names. So we pour libation in honor of those fallen humans who died through this peculiar institution. And then from there, we go back up to Rampart Street and we head into what is called Congo Square, Armstrong Park, and then the Tree of the Ancestors. And that covers all of our libations. But what we done when we brought this particular part together, we studied what they was doing in Benin. Because what New Orleans is doing is mirroring what's in Benin, West Africa. They do Vodou Day, which is a 2-day procession, but they start at the river from what's called the Doe of No Return. And then from there, they hit some of the markers where slaves took their last bath, where they done A, B, C, or D before they embarked on ships. And so to mimic what they was doing, we hit in 10 historical perspectives that's sort of dealing with slavery. Now that brings us into Congo Square, where the Hoofa, our Mumbo, Sally Ann, and everyone do a Haitian style ceremony. I'm not, I see it, but I just don't have the background on it, so I can't really speak on it that well.
Yeah.
But this is what we are doing.
And I think it's right now, to me, it's a very important time that we don't let these visions, these historic possessions be erased. It's not meant to create more suffering. It's meant to create uncomfortableness so people understand where growth and change is necessary. And I think that is really important, not only during this time frame in history, but like as the ancestors of the future, to be able to hold those spaces with honor, with respect, with love, with sacredness and compassion is very, very important. And it shouldn't be looked away from because it creates uncomfortableness.
Oh, that is powerful. And I'm glad you're speaking to uncomfortableness, because even coming to your show tonight, you're pulling me out of the shell, because I was very uncomfortable, one, speaking around voodoo, ancestry, and what we call the ATRs, because so many people are afraid of it. They would step in to get an item done, a reading or something, or buy a particular curio. They'll do that. But outside of that, they don't want to touch it. They don't want to talk about it. And so because of the rejection, I would just kind of stay withdrawn. Know what I know, live my truth, and just be within myself. But even you inviting me out is pulling me out of my shell, because the world need to know. They need to know more. And the storytellers, the cultural barriers really need to put the word out.
And understand the truth, not the myth. And that's that is where, where my feet will always be planted. We need to talk about the truth, not the myth.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, thank you so much for being on. So every show I ask 3 questions to the guests. And so the first one is, what do you think it means to be your soul?
What I believe it is to be my soul is a reincarnation of an ancestor. And I believe my ancestor that I reincarnated through came through the energy of water. And because that connect was made and solidified with the outer body experience in 1987. And so when I pour libations, when I offer even a bottle of water to a stranger, I feel whole and complete. So my soul is a water-based soul. Mm-hmm.
I love that. So, what's one thing you do for self-care to like take care of yourself, to keep your container, whole, healthy, and well, to be able to hold this work that you do?
Yes, yes. Every morning, first thing I do is offer water to my ancestors. To honor myself, I honor Reginald Green, which is my full name.
Mhm.
Because if I don't love myself, how can anyone even love and respect me?
Mm.
And then the third thing I do, I love my family as a whole. And then fourth, I find and always push myself to love my community in spite of all these troubles, its ups and downs. Once I take care of those four, then I'm an open vessel for the day and have that spirit has its way.
Nice.
Mhm.
And how do you know what that feels like? Can you sense when you get off during the day, or can you give people kind of an insight on what that centered and balanced feels like?
Yes, it's when, for me, if I'm calm and I'm moving and I'm paying attention to spirit, there's an easiness about things. But when I get hostile, when I get frustrated, and when I start withdrawing from the world, I know I'm off center. And so now this lead me to spiritual baths, or even lead me to a bath with Florida water, or something to redirect me back to my mission and my journey. And as a human being, human frails and human mindset come into play, and sometimes we lose our way. But I do make my way back. Yes.
Well,
Hmm.
thank you so much for being on this show. I really
Yes.
appreciate you.
Thank you, Sister Sky. And thanks for pulling me out of my shell. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, dear listener, for being here, for choosing presence, for listening with openness, and for allowing this conversation to meet you wherever you are on your path. We know you have many places you could spend your time, and we're truly grateful you chose to share this moment with us. A heartfelt thank you to Elder Reggie for sharing your wisdom, perspective, and commitment to honoring the traditions and values that shape community across generations. Your reflections remind us that legacy is not something we leave behind someday. It is something we live through the choices we make today and through the care we extend to the world and the people around us.
I see. I see. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. Thank you. If you feel called to learn more about the sacred cultural work Elder Reggie and other tradition bearers are carrying forward through New Orleans International Vodou Day, you can explore their efforts and support their GoFundMe at www.voodooday.org. That's www.voodooday.org.
Ready to explore what it truly means to work with your mind, body, and energy together as an integrated system? The Be Your Soul Classroom, created by Sky Bradshaw, is an online learning space designed to support self-awareness, spiritual growth, and embodied understanding through practical, soul-centered teachings. Inside the classroom, you'll find a growing collection of online courses and offerings that explore energy awareness, intuition, personal alignment, and conscious living, each designed to meet you exactly where you are. Courses blend written lessons, video teachings, guided meditations, reflective exercises, and experiential practices, allowing you to learn in a way that feels grounded, accessible, and alive. Whether you're deepening your relationship with energy, strengthening intuition, or learning how to apply spiritual awareness to everyday life, the Be Your Soul Classroom offers both structure and spaciousness for your journey. Many courses are available on demand, so you can move at your own pace, while select offerings also include live Zoom sessions for those who enjoy learning in community and real-time connection. This is a space to return to yourself again and again, with clarity, intention, and care. Visit beyoursoul.org to explore the Be Your Soul Classroom and discover the courses that support your next season of growth.
When we talk about legacy, it can sometimes feel like something distant, something that only exists far in the future. But legacy is really about the choices we make right now, the values we live by, the way we treat others, and the care we show our communities all become part of the story that future generations inherit. So, this reflection invites you to explore a simple question: what are the ingredients of a good ancestor? One of the ways I often help people think about growth and intention is through the analogy of baking a cake. If we're going to bake a cake, the first thing we would do is find a recipe that appeals to us. The recipe tells us what ingredients we need and the order in which those ingredients come together to create cake. Then we go to the cupboard and ask, what do I already have on hand? And what elements are missing that I need to acquire to accomplish this goal? As you think about the ingredients you're writing down, it's also worth asking yourself something important. Are you choosing a recipe that's realistic for where you are right now? Because there's a difference between baking a simple pound cake and trying to make a 5-layer wedding cake with chocolate ganache and sugar flowers on your first try. One is something most of us can step into and learn as we go. The other might require years of practice in a professional kitchen. So part of this reflection is also asking yourself, am I choosing ingredients that I can truly begin working with right now? Because growth isn't about building the most elaborate recipe imaginable. Sometimes it's about starting where you are and learning to make it well. And just having the ingredients doesn't mean we have cake yet. It simply means we have what it takes to do the work to create cake. The cake also comes together when those ingredients are combined in the right way at the right time. So let's bring that same thinking into the idea of being a good ancestor. Take a moment and reflect on people whose legacy you admire. They might be people you know personally, people in your family line, or even historical figures whose lives made a meaningful impact. Ask yourself, what qualities made them someone others looked up to? What values did they live by? What actions or choices created strength for those who came after them? Now imagine you are writing the recipe for a good ancestor. Based on what you just reflected upon, what are the 11 ingredients that make up a good ancestor? You might write down things like integrity, kindness, courage, responsibility, compassion, wisdom, patience, or care for community. Let yourself create a list of qualities that feel important to you. Then turn that reflection inward. Out of the ingredients on your list, ask yourself, which of these qualities are already present in my life right now? Give yourself your flowers and see the beauty that already exists within you. Where do these qualities show up in your choices, your actions, your values, your relationships, or the way you move through the world? And then gently ask another question. Which ingredients might still be missing or need some refining in my life? If something feels missing, that's not a place for judgment. It's a simple awareness. Just like when we're baking, we notice what's in the cupboard and what we might need to go gather. So consider, what would help you cultivate that missing quality right now? Is it something you can practice, learn, or grow into over time? What small step might help you begin bringing that ingredient into your life? Because just like baking a cake, having the ingredients is only the beginning. The real work happens as we bring them together through our everyday choices, actions, and decisions. And that's the invitation here, to live with awareness that the way we show up today becomes part of the foundation for tomorrow. So as you move through this week, you might carry this reflection with you. What are the ingredients of a good ancestor? Which ones are already present in your world? And which ones are you ready to begin gathering? Because every small choice you make to live with intention, care, and alignment becomes part of the legacy you are already creating. Each time you choose kindness, compassion, and love, that choice ripples outward and opens the possibility for others to do the same. In every movement you make, no matter how grand or how small, there is an opportunity to positively influence the future and strengthen the path for those who will one day walk behind you. May you be well, may you feel whole, may you be blessed, and may you feel peace, and may you always be your soul.
If something in today's episode spoke to your soul, you don't have to stop here. Visit beyoursoul.org, where you'll find a wide circle of support. Love Church, our free Sunday gathering, streaming live every second and fourth Sunday. The Be Your Soul classroom, full of self-paced courses, guided journals, and healing tools. Our YouTube channel, home to meditations, interviews, and spirit-led support you can revisit anytime. And of course, all podcast episodes, ready when you need a message, reminder, or a little reconnection. Everything we create is rooted in one mission. When the one is strengthened, the sum is strengthened.